If you're watching The Price is Rise, there's a question you really need to know the answer to.
Believe it or not, we're halfway through 2022.
Woo!
Yes. And, all of us are facing the massive price increases. And I know for most of us, it's just kind of a matter of getting through month to month. But we need to start thinking about the budget for 2023 because that's coming around the corner as well.
We met with our financial planner last week and he asked us a very interesting question that honestly, it kind of made us a little bit sick to our stomach, I got to be honest. But we realized that we absolutely needed to know the answer to that question. He asked us, in light of rising prices, what do you plan to do with these areas of your budget? Food, gas, and utilities. So now you know why it kind of made us feel a little bit queasy. Now, we had actually thought about these areas of our budget already, and we realized that we had taken 3 super important steps that allowed us to actually answer his question in about 30 seconds. So what we want to share with you on the video today is what those 3 super important steps are, how you can begin taking those steps as you're looking toward the end actually of 2022, getting through the last 6 months of 2022 and prepping for the following year. And we want you to make sure you stick with us because I made a chart to show you exactly how you can implement these steps in your own life.
Hope and I are not alarmists. We don't make knee-jerk reactions, but we need to know what's going on and what's happening around us. And we think it's very important to be tuned in to the right sources so we have our finger on the pulse and we can put a plan of action into place.
And the most important thing about that plan of action is that it allows you to sleep better at night, knowing that there's a whole lot of stuff going on right now that you cannot control. So wasting a lot of time like worrying about what you can't control isn't real productive. But here's what is productive: taking steps to control what you can control. And that's what this video is all about. By the way, the sponsor for this video is the guy that helps us sleep better at night, John Creekmur from Creekmur Wealth Advisors. He is the one that asked us that question a week ago around which this entire video became based. John has helped us to break down our numbers and our budget into smaller steps that make sense and help us to move forward from where we're at to where we want to be. He has helped us with our budgeting, with our investments, with our retirement goals, and with our savings plan. And he can do the same thing for you if you live in the United States. He's happy to answer any of your questions. Creekmur Wealth Advisors, there's a link, guys, in the description of the video.
Well, let's start with the 3 steps that we have that you can take right now. What is the first step, Hope?
Gather information from a variety of sources and a variety of viewpoints. Now, why is that important?
Well, you never want to take one person's opinion as gold. You want to check several different sources and check them against each other. And also, if you can find out what their source of information is and you can get it back to the primary source, then you're going to be probably in pretty good shape. And I would take some time, even while doing that, before you put in a plan of action.
One of the things that we learned years ago when we were in college, we studied multimedia. So I worked in radio, Larry worked in television. And the rule was you did not report something until it had been verified through 3 separate, reliable sources. And we still, to this day, like that's stuck in our head. And we still use that exact same formula when we are doing research. Let's say we're doing research on rising gas prices. Now, we all know, like, there's all of this, information floating around about whether gas prices are going to go to $10 a gallon, $8 a gallon. Those of you who live in Canada are like, what? It's already $10 a gallon. We so understand that like 25% of you who watch us don't live in the United States. So you're saying, oh yeah, already there. Well, in the States, there's this sort of rumor going around about, when we're going to reach $10 a gallon or if we are. So you got a lot of people talking about it. And they're giving opinion, but it's not necessarily based on any sources that are backed up by reputable people. So it's always good to go in and say, I wonder where they got that information from.
You know, there was a big story going around, I think it was last week or
Yep.
2 weeks ago, that they're adding a fourth digit to the gas pumps to accommodate $10 a gallon in the United States. And I remember talking to Hope on the phone about that and saying, wow, did you know that they're planning on $10 a gallon gas? Well, we did a little research this afternoon, and we found an article from Fortune magazine that checked out that story. And what it is, it's a story out of Auburn, Washington, where they're adding a fourth digit to accommodate a racing formula of gas that's going to cost over $10 a gallon. And they're not changing all of the pumps. It's just one pump at a 76 gas station that's involved with this.
Now, are they adding that extra digit?
Yes.
Yes, they are. Are they adding it to all the pumps throughout all of the 76 stations throughout the United States, wherever those gas stations exist? No. They're doing it at that one gas station because right now that racing formula is already running between $8 and $9 a gallon. So yes, they're anticipating $10 a gallon. Now, are we saying gas won't get to $10 a gallon? It may not.
We don't know.
But the point is, if you're panicking now about $10 a gallon gas, you're probably certainly very premature, if nothing else. Now, if you want to prepare for much higher gas prices this summer, I think across the board, people are saying in the U.S. it's going to average across the United States, I think $7 a gallon by the end of August. But those of you on the East or West Coast, you're already well there, and we're aware of that. So y'all may see $10 a gallon long before we do in the Midwest. But our point is this: check the sources. Know where these people who are giving information are getting their information. Check it out 2 or 3 different places, and then you decide, what level am I going to react to on this? Because if you react to a level 10 on everything you hear, you're going to be sitting with anxiety a lot of the time.
One thing you have to keep in mind is that the major television news outlets are looking for good ratings and advertising dollars. One of the vehicles that they employ is a sensational headline that will get you. Usually it's going to generate either fear or anger, and they actually get the highest ratings off of those two emotional elements. So keep that in mind.
So who do we watch when it comes to prepping and frugality? We decided to give you our top 6 favorites. Larry's going to start with prepping channels.
Well, a channel that I like to watch quite a bit is the City Prepper. I think he does a lot of good research. He's got his finger on the pulse, and he gives out some good information. Another one is Goshen Prepping. It's a couple. They do an excellent job of giving some good tips, things that they're doing to be prepared. And then there's the Provident Preppers. They're out of Utah, and they do a nice job. Really nice couple. They've been doing this for a long time. Great information.
I also like Big Family Homestead, which, I mean, we don't homestead. We don't raise animals. We don't do a lot of the stuff they do, but I think they're just genuinely kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, they're very down to earth.
Frugality. I didn't know where to put him. He does not frugality. He's the economic ninja, guys. I don't even know where to place him in between prepping and frugality, but I do enjoy him so much. I wanted to mention him. Do I agree with everything he says? No, I do not. But I think he's got some kind of an inside track when it comes to shipping and things like that.
Another one we like, of course, is Prepper Princess. I think she's very down to earth, very matter of fact, and
Prepper Princess.
And straightforward. Oh my gosh, she's been doing it a long time. Great resource.
Yes, she does. And now we can't leave this section of the video without mentioning our buddy Kate Caden. Hey, Kate, go watch Kate if you've never watched her before. She does a great job talking about minimalism and frugality. All right, what's on your list? Remember, don't get politically nippy at one another in the comments section. We like to keep this real civil so that we can all learn from one another. Plus, guys, we're looking for some new channels to follow. So tell us who's going to give us great information.
Step number 2 is watch the numbers and know how that they are impacting you.
It is literally not enough to know something like the rate of inflation. Because how many of you actually believe that the rate of inflation represents how your budget's been impacted by those rising prices and the rate of inflation? No, none of us does, because the truth is, like statistically, what's happening is not a reflection of what's happening in our homes. So you have to know the rate of inflation. Is that important? Yep, it's good to know the rate of inflation, but it's better to know how those prices are impacting your family monthly budget. So that's what you really need to hone in on.
You need to know what the economists are saying about
Yeah.
these numbers and how it's going to impact you in the future.
Look, economists have been trained not only to understand how the money system works, but also to understand how it's impacting family budgets and likely to impact family budgets, because they look at historic trends and what has happened over the past 150, 200 years, however long they look back in history to see what inflation's done in the past, what the money system's done in the past, and what it's likely to do in the present and future. We think it's valid information.
And you know, the numbers that you watch will be different from the numbers that we watch. For instance, you might be watching very closely the cost of meat. Well, that isn't affecting us too much since we don't eat meat. But that will be something that you'll have to look into and make adjustments for.
So the question that we would have for you are, what are the numbers that are most important to you, and what are the numbers that you're watching? One of the numbers that we are watching really closely right now is the supply cost of electricity and natural gas, because that has doubled in our area in the last 12 months. We're watching that. Now, we can't control the supply costs, because remember we told you, you don't focus on what you can't control, but what you can control. We can't control what they're going to charge us to supply that electricity. What we can control is the amount of electricity that we use. So those are the areas we're looking at. And remember, we're going to show you a chart to show you how to put all this information together.
So what you need to be doing is watching the trends. Take a look and see where they're going, and then you can plan for how you're going to make changes to adopt to those.
And one of the things we've also mentioned recently is that, and we don't want you to get confused because we're talking about looking forward, we're almost halfway through 2022. We said start looking at 2023. Does that mean that we want you to forecast 6 months in the future? You know what? We really don't. Because Larry and I are no longer doing a deep dive into our finances twice a year, which is what we did for many, many years, probably the last 20 years. It's been twice a year. We're like, we better do a really deep dive and figure out where we're at. Every 3 months. That is what we are focusing on at this point, is really looking at those trends and looking at them far more closely and more often than we did before.
Let's take an example. If they were to add that fourth digit to the gas pump, how would that affect you? And what changes would you have to make to accommodate those kind of prices? Those are the kinds of things that we're looking into.
And those are the questions that we think are really valid to ask yourself when you see those stories of, oh, they're adding another digit to the gas pump. So what if it did happen? Do we think it's going to happen? Who knows? But if it did, we've already sat down and said, let's say that it did. What would we do? Those are questions you honestly need to be asking yourself when you see and hear about these things.
What's the bottom line in all this? Well, we feel and we know that we're going to have to expect to make changes. That for sure is going to be in our future.
So that takes us right into step number 3, which is, as you're looking toward that expectation of making changes, you need to start strategizing changes well in advance. Really, if gas does go to $10 a gallon, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you, because you should already have thought through what if.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you can do is set upper limits on things that you're buying now, especially at the grocery store. Let's say that chuck roast goes to $10 a pound. Well, what are you going to do to make some adjustments? Are you going to eat it less? Are you going to cut it out altogether and go for some alternatives? But these are the kind of things that we're going to have to be looking at.
The next thing that you can do in relation to strategizing ahead of time is to make prioritized lists. Yes, it's my favorite word, prioritized, because any list that you make should have your top priorities at the top of that list. Now, for most of us, unless you're living in a large city and you're either riding your bicycle everywhere or you're taking public transportation, then the cost of transportation in regards to gasoline in your personal car, that's going to be right at the top of your prioritized list. So on our prioritized list of changes we anticipate we're going to have to make in the next few months, gasoline right at the top. And that's where we're doing our research right now, and we're figuring out, even if gas goes to $10 a gallon, most of us are still going to be we're going to have to purchase a certain quantity of gasoline. So underneath of gasoline at the top of your prioritized list, you're going to be brainstorming ways that you can still afford gasoline, or you're going to move money from other areas of your budget, for instance, or you're going to create some more space in that budget somehow, in that budget category, maybe have a side job in order to create some more income, or you're going to do one of the 50 things that we told you to do.
Just going to mention that.
We did a video on it, guys. It's linked up above. And in the description of this video, we give you 50 ways you can save on the cost of gasoline. So maybe some of those ideas will go on your prioritized list for gasoline costs.
Yeah, two things that come to mind with gasoline savings would be carpooling, doing without some of the different things that we used to drive to, maybe just cutting them out altogether if they're extra things, or using public transportation. I'm opting to ride a bike when I can. When the weather's good, I'm trying to ride a bike to work, and that will keep the car at home and away from the gas station.
In case you can't tell, we are all about being proactive and really not so much about being reactive. Because we feel like when you're reactive, you begin to make quick changes, and they're not always for the best. So make sure that you're being very proactive, and having that prioritized list, huge part of that. Now, what happens if they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank here. I have no idea what I'm going to do to save on whatever area of my budget. We like to tell you to do what we call the 10% challenge. We use it, and it does really work, guys.
Yeah, and that is where you take a good look at your budget and you cut 10% out of most of the categories in order to have some extra money to work with.
Now, we don't like this to take a super long time, so we tell you set a timer for 20 minutes, grab your partner by the hand, get that list in front of you, and you are going to brainstorm together ways that you can cut just 10% off each area of your budget. We've had a whole lot of viewers that did it. Hey, if you're a viewer and you've done the 10% challenge, tell us in the comments section, will you? We had a viewer that contacted us, said she did it, and they started saving it was over $1,000 a year.
Yes.
From just doing the 10% challenge. They figured out how they were going to cut 10% off a whole bunch of budget categories. So that's our best suggestion for you if you feel like you're stuck.
If you have some available money and space in your home, we would definitely recommend stocking up on some items that will keep. Right now is going to be the cheapest time to buy many items at the store. So if you can do that, I know a lot of preppers will recommend when you're buying one item, buy an extra and put that aside. I think that's great advice. That way you're not going full blown on it and trying to bust your budget in half, trying to save up a little. So if you just do a little bit at a time, do it consistently, you'll have some extra store of food in your house. Another thing you should look at is if you have an item in your house that might be ailing and maybe it's on its last leg. Well, now might be a good time to replace that item while you can afford to do so. And another thing that you need to do is carefully consider what are your needs and your wants. Now is not probably a good time to be buying things that you don't need.
We promised you a chart that would show you how to take all three of these steps that we just suggested to you and put them in a nice, easy to read and easy to use and understand format. Here you go. This chart really has you thinking like a newspaper reporter. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. You start at the top there. You'll see it says information about. You're just going to fill in. Maybe you're looking for information about gas prices or food prices. utility costs, electric costs, things like that. So you're going to put in that blank there at the top. What are you researching? The date, because once again, remember we suggested every 3 months you're going to go through this process. There's your 3 sources. We told you why that's important. You don't want to make decisions based on just one source. Where did I find this source? Put the URL in there because it's remarkably harder to come back and find information than you actually believe that it is.
Yeah.
What is the source saying? And I would just bullet point that. It says 1, 2, 3 or ABC or just little bullet points of exactly, just synopsize what that source is saying about the issues.
When do they think this will happen? And you also want to know how should I react to this information? This is where you're going to put a plan of action into place. And once again, just bullet point, summarize what you think you might be able to do to compensate.
Now, the other thing you might want to do in that space down there under how is to just sort of put, how am I feeling about this source of information? Maybe later you'll decide that wasn't as credible as I thought that source of information was. Now, down there at the bottom is a super important part. The top 3, remember these are prioritized. Top 3 steps I will take now in response to the information that I've just gotten on this area of my budget. And also remember, everything is subject to change. That's why we tell you every 3 months, go back through, look at the research you've done and see how the trends have really played out. Because we just discovered, he's like, what are we spending on gas? I said, let me look, because we're at that 3-month point where we're realizing gas went up a whopping lot more in the past 3 months than we thought that it would. So once again, we are evaluating. It's all about strategically evaluating the information that's available to you, making changes, checking to see if those changes were adequate or not, and staying on top of those trends, reevaluating at least once every 3 months. Larry came up with a great list of questions he thinks everyone should ask themselves before they make changes or before they purchase something.
Yeah, before you look at an item that you think you might need, consider the following. Can you rent it? Can you borrow it? Can you barter for it? Do I really need it? Can it wait? Is there another way to get the job done? Can I substitute it for something else? And can I get it cheaper? Am I doing all that I can to save money before purchasing this item? That means, have I checked out every resource? Go to Amazon, go to other websites, compare prices, and try to get the very best value for that item.
I promised you a chart and I made you one to help you implement all 3 steps that we just shared with you. I just sent out a link to our subscriber list that gave them a free copy of this chart. So if you like it and you want to get your hands on it, then there's a link in the description of this video. I'll send you a sweet little ebook on 10 ways that we radically reduced our budget. You'll be on the email subscriber list, and I'm going to send out this chart again a week from today. Once you're on the list, you'll get this chart on Monday. Shout out once again to the sponsor for this video, Creekmur Wealth Advisors. Remember, guys, there's a link to them in the description of this video. Now, if you would like to know a list of things that we actually have done in response to inflation and how our budget has changed, we did a video on it. There's a link to it right over there in case you haven't watched it.
Is there an item in my house that's, say, older? Maybe it's ailing and you think maybe it's kind of on its last legs. Now might...
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I couldn't resist.
I am irreplaceable. You just can't do that.
I'm so sorry.